All right. Oh, good. All right. So my name is Michael Sakamoto. I am from UL Solutions. It used to be called UL, and many of you old school folks may know us Underwriters Laboratories, right? So I thought I'd just throw all of the names out there just so recognition. Now this is going to be somewhat of a non-technical discussion, but it's going to be about standards. So what I want to do is cover two things really, is the sort of the purpose for a standard. All right, a lot of people, I may be new to standards, and it's like, all right, why do we have these things, and why is it so important? The other thing is, there is a core standard. It's an IEC standard, 62368-1. This covers a lot of your IT equipment in the data center, and there's a fourth edition that just got published recently. So I want to just talk you through this, and I don't want to get into any rabbit holes with a lot of technical things, because any subject could be a good 30 minutes or an hour discussion. Just want to highlight a few things. And if you have further detail, you can always catch me after the meeting, and we can always follow up, right? So you know, there's a role of industry standards. Now, before I go through some of these items, the standards really was implemented when the federal government passed a law back in 1995. President Clinton signed it in 1996 that says regulatory bodies should not create their own rules, especially for things like safety. What they should do is they should have industry basically develop standards, and government agencies should point to those standards and reference those standards so that it's a lot more easier to implement, and it doesn't cost these agencies a lot of money to create things from scratch. So that's how things got started. So if you kind of look at workplace, right, OSHA, if you go to their website, they have a whole many of standards they reference. Or if you have a Consumer Product Safety Commission has their list of standards. Or if it's medical, the FDA. So these agencies are required to point to standards, and so this is why the role of standards exists. So the standards basically is a guideline for making sure there's consistent design and security operations, and they just meet the needs of current and future technologies. And also is very important how the code or regulations can be met. So if you look at a code, would it be a facility code, a building code, or electrical code? It tells you what things you need to do. The standards tell you how you do it and how you test for it to make sure that it meets the code. And it's really critical, especially in the area of safety, right? Safety of components, not only for the end system, but also the components that you're using and even the subassemblies. And these standards could be voluntary or they could be mandatory. You know, it could be like voluntary. It could be voluntary by regulatory nature, but from your business model, it may be mandatory because the customer says, I need to see it, right? So it's really up to your business model and how customers that you're engaging in what markets. It could be used regional or globally, and then it's developed and maintained by a number of standard development organizations, which we are one. Some of the other ones are like ASTM, NIST is another one. There's a bunch of them out there that make standards, and they look to get adopted by industries in different fashions. So I'm going to jump into the standard, 62368-1. Again, this is the core standard for electronic equipment, and also covers audio, video, and communication equipment, not exceeding 600 volts. And the standard does not include requirements for performance or functional characteristics of equipment. And the current edition that just got published is the 4th edition, and it got published on May 26th of last year. Now what happens is the IEC 62368 is the mother standard. And then based on that, the other regions will take that standard and create their own standard. So in the US, in Canada, it's the UL 62368, or the EN for the Europe, or there are a lot of other regions will adopt this standard and create their own version. So one example would be in the US, the UL 62368, what they would do is incorporate all of the National Electrical Code requirements, right? Because that applies specifically to the US, so they call them the national differences or the national deviations. And that becomes part of the UL version of the 62368 standard. So that's sort of how things are developed now. On the 4th edition, there are a couple key things. So this is going to get a little deeper into the standard itself. What are some of the key highlights of this new edition of the standard? So first thing they did is they said, all right, let's finally sunset the old standard, right? There were two standards that used to be, that covered this category. One was for IT equipment, one was for audio video. And they said, managing two standards were hard, so they created the 62368. Finally, after the 4th edition, they said, let's sunset the old standards, right? We don't need them anymore. We don't want people certifying products through the old standards anymore. So it's basically taken out. There are requirements now for coin cell batteries. This was a huge item from the consumer protection side. CPSC was very adamant that we have to have this. I think some of you have like it's called Megan's law, right? A child that swallowed batteries in it, you know. So that is another thing that's included in the 4th edition. There are, and this would be much relevant to OCP, there is a lot of updates and clarification based on use of liquids, the liquid cooling. So if you're into the liquid, in the standard calls it LFC, liquid filled components. So if you have devices that are using liquid cooling, this is an area that you really want to hone in on and look at and review, because between the 3rd edition and 4th edition, there's been a lot of updates on that. And a lot of it's really beneficial because it's clarifying a lot of things that were a little bit vague previously. So that's good. And there's also some other things, and I've also mentioned the clause number of the standard. There's been updated requirements on capacitor discharge after disconnects, safeguards under single fault conditions. There's also touch temperatures for wearables, you know, like watches and things like that. And also refinements to the requirements for equipment containing batteries in the protection circuits, which is under Annex M. So, and batteries, again, it's a major, major topic of hazard that they want to, you know, maintain some visibility with this standard. Now, getting into the liquid cooling side, I was able to extract a few items on the liquid cooling side on the 4th edition, which is a lot more clear now. The terminology they use in the standard is liquid filled components, or it's LFC. So if somebody in the standard world says LFC, you know that involves liquid cooling. The new terminology, so what it has is it's got new terminologies covering coolants, liquid cooling systems, LFC, LFC assembly, modular LFC. So these are all terminologies that are now defined in the standard. It also contains requirements for both self-contained systems, either traditional smaller systems, less than a liter, or larger systems, and also provide some differentiation based on how amount of fluid that you're using. Also, they made sure that, hey, if you are using refrigerants, you should not be using the 62368 standard. You should be using 600335-2-40. So they made a very clear delineation at that point. So if you're using coolants, 62368-1. If you're using refrigerants, it's 60335-2-40. And some of you that know standards probably know this fairly well, but that's sort of the new sort of delineation they put into the standard. They also have items for hydrostatic pressure tests for self-contained systems. It's reduced to 1 minute duration versus the 2 minute they had before. They just thought that 2 minutes was a little bit too long, so that they reduced it. So again, you can see a number of things where they are just refining and clarifying so it's more relevant to the systems that are being sold today. And they would probably keep looking at this area because they just know that there's a lot of activity going on and technology is evolving. So, so this is sort of a good thing. And then, you know, the modular systems do not have vibration test requirements. Now they're saying just have that done during on-site inspection. Don't have to do it within the scope of the standard. And that's under G15. So that's that. And then also, you know, there are some other smaller nuances is where compliance is more checked by inspection and evaluation of the available test data and by test noted. And there's a G15, which is the critical clause in the standard. And then also, you know, very basic, but during and after the test, there should be no rupture, leaks, or loosening of any connection of parts. And due to variations in emergence of new technology, it's recommended that if you approach a test house, don't jump in certified. Do a gap analysis first. Do a preliminary design review, especially if you're new to this area and you're chasing certification down. Try to approach the test house or certification house and say, let's just do a preliminary design review first. And if you extract gaps in that, then you can correct the gaps before you go out and do your final certification. And it'll save you some time, and it'll save you a lot of money in the long run, okay? So immersion cooling. For immersion cooling, there's in the 3rd edition, there was a whole section for immersion cooling. In the 4th edition, there's been really no change. Now, for the immersion cooling community, it's a little disappointing because there's been no changes. And I can honestly tell you, if I looked at the current requirements for immersion cooling today, a lot of the requirements in there really are not applicable to the systems that you guys are selling today or involved with today. So there's going to be a lot more emphasis put on how do we fix this, how do we correct this part of the requirements. But I just highlighted a few items here. Insulating liquids, right now for the auto ignition, they use 300 degrees C. And then for the flashpoint, they use higher than 135. And there are a lot of people have agreements and disagreements in this area. But, and this OCP is a great forum to have those dialogues to say what does it need to be. And they also have safeguards against liquid displacement. So you have to have sensors to make sure that it has the ability to find out how much liquid displacement's going on. And then there's also a requirement for a 60-day compatibility test. Now, a lot of people say 60 days, I don't even know if that's going to generate any data that's useful, right? So there's a lot of people that are thinking about, all right, how do we fix what's in this existing standard for immersion? So what we have done is we have provided OCP now is formally set up as an official liaison partner with the Technical Committee 108, which is the governing body of 62368. So through the FMEA work stream groups and the different work stream groups, there's going to be a task to generate a proposal that updates this area of criteria and requirements to the TC 108 so that they can update the standard for future editions. So that's sort of on this community here to get that going. So again, the FMEA workstream group has done a lot of work already. There's a lot of information already that they have gathered. And right now what we're going to do is we're going to start to pull that together into a proposal and then run that through the OCP and then get that over to the technical committee for approval. So that's going on. And while this is going on, we will probably, from the UL side, we will actually be probably announcing some standards in the next couple weeks. One's going to be a fluid safety standard and also a system standard that looks at unconfigured systems. Because I know most of you are selling systems but not fully configured with servers, right? So we're looking at probably publishing 2 standards, and we want to vet that through the OCP community as well. Okay. So the call to action, I'm also involved with the industry liaison group with Kelly Mullock and Marianne M. I'm going to use M because her last name is, I will butcher that last name, but, and then, and some of the liquid cooling stuff we talked about, so there's a group on liquid cooling, and then also the workstream group in terms of immersion requirements, which is ongoing right now as well. So if you guys can all help out and be collaborative through this forum here in this community to help, put some of these things together, that'll be very, very helpful. So, and that's it. Thank you. Any questions? No? That's good. All right.